Barley.
Welcome to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. I'm Mike Roberts, and with me is Bill Barley, who is a man who knows a great deal about the country, who is a placer miner himself, a former school teacher, a writer about the history of this part of the country. Where are we going to go to today, Bill? What's the special area that's near and dear to your heart?
Fairly close to us, Mike. It's South Okanagan and an old camp called Fairview, which has vanished now, of course.
Fairview.
Fairview.
What attracted people to it?
It was a gold camp, 1880s, kind of interesting guy who kind of fades into history called One-Armed Reed, and his partner came through searching for placer gold, which was the easiest gold to mine, of course, and panning every little creek and draw in that arid area, and there weren't very many, by the way. But they discovered and found some quartz stringers and veins in a gulch just up from Fairview, which they thought was fairly promising-looking ground. They didn't stop to stake it, but in 1887, 90 years ago, excuse me, 100 years ago, two other miners came through, Sheenan and Watkins, and they staked the Morning Star. And that was really the key claim of the whole Fairview camp. There was the Morning Star, and there was the Evening Star, and there was the North Star, and the Joe Dandy, and the Rattler, and the Tin Horn, and a bunch of other good mines and poor mines and come-along mines and so on.
Was it a good find? How much gold did they haul out of there?
Yeah, it was quite a good find. It wasn't a big camp like Rossland or Nelson or Sandon or some of the other great camps of the West, but it was, for its size, for a restricted area, it was a good gold camp for about 10 or 15 years.
And it has some great stories and a treasure story associated with it.
Yeah, kind of a fascinating treasure story, Mike.
All right, that's coming up in this program as we take a look at Fairview, a fascinating story, and we'll do that with Bill Barley right after we come back from this break. Welcome back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. I'm Mike Roberts with Bill Barley. Fairview is the name of the game today. When did the town establish? Because it seemed there were a lot of camps around, but when did they establish a town?
Yeah, once the mines came into production, they had to have a town, so they actually chose a poor site. They chose it at the mouth of Reed Creek Gulch, little creek running down the gulch, and there were two town sites. There was the original town site, the Latimer town site, established in 1897, and then a second town site, which competed with the first town site, and this is Deere, Davidson, and Russell. Yeah. And the first town site was probably the more prominent and popular, but indeed, the second town site had one magnificent building on it, and this was the famous Hotel Fairview. Get to
that in just a second. What's the Golden Gate Hotel got to do with all this? This looks like a rustic establishment.
Yeah, this was at the mouth of, very close to the mouth of Reed Creek Gulch, and it was typical of the log cabin hotels of the 1890s and the turn of the century. Yeah. And it was quite a popular hotel.
Looks like it. Look at the clientele out front. Anybody you recognize in there?
Yeah, there's the honky-tonk piano player, a guy named Atkins, and they're obviously waiting for the stagecoach. And so everyone's gathered out there and waiting for the stage to come in to get the incoming mail and so on.
Right. Again, we come to the time when people needed to put together a little bit of a nest egg to begin anything. We have here the silver, now this looks like a handsome piece of paper. Silver Bow Quartz Mining Company. What was the value of Silver Bow after they went to all this gilt-edged work?
They were going to put on 1 million shares in the market at $1 a piece, which would be $1 million. The only problem was the Silver Bow never got off the ground, Mike. That's why it's not filled in at all. And it's a nice stock certificate. It's got Fairview, British Columbia. It's 1890, so it's at the right time, but it was a stock promotion.
And it's such great work. I mean, the printing company that did these up must have made a fair amount of money, but it never got off the ground.
Never got off the ground.
Some great ideas. I've got a piece of gold here. Now, this, I guess, tells us a lot about what developed Fairview.
Yeah, you see, there were a lot of Americans in Fairview, like many of the mining towns in British Columbia, and so many of the coins used in this town were American coins, especially the gold pieces. There were some English sovereigns and half sovereigns used, Mike, but there were also a number of American double eagles, which would be $20 gold piece, the eagle, the $10 gold piece, and the half eagle, which is a $5 gold piece.
This is a 1901.
That's 1901.
Did you find this coin there?
No, I didn't. I found the other coin there. This one is reputed to have come from the Golden Gate, and it's quite possible because I did find some gold coins some years ago right near the boardwalk of the Golden Gate.
There are some, I mean, I think the Golden Gate Hotel looked rough enough, but this guy, this is the saloon.
This is the saloon, Jack Moffat's saloon. way up the gulch, much beyond, several miles beyond the old town sites of Fairview. It's on the Otto Hess property, and Hess took very good care of it. And it's one of the few buildings that in this particular area that has a considerable amount of historic significance. And you can, if you go into that building, and Hess is very careful of it, you will find that that there was a place inside where they actually had the wanted posters, and you see where all the tacks were put right against the wall there, wanted and so on.
He was security conscious. That door looked substantial enough.
Indeed it was.
Yeah. This is a little trinket that you picked up near Moffat's.
One of my students picked that up and gave it to me, and I gave him some gold dust for it. And that's a 38, probably a gambler's special.
Hexagon barrel.
Yeah, hexagon barrel, and not in very good condition. The cylinder's gone, and most of the...
Actually, an octagon barrel, sorry.
Yeah, and, but it's kind of interesting, typical of the day. It would be carried probably by a tin horn gambler.
And a lot of this kind of activity went on because, again, where you had the American influence, things were a little more flashy, rough.
Rough and ready, yeah, indeed.
All right. Okay, another, I mean, not all bad guys were American, I guess. Bill Miner was our very own Canadian.
Actually, he wasn't. He was born in the States, but much of his career was spent in Canada. He was the guy who originated the phrase, hands up, Mike. And he drifted over the Canadian line because things were getting a little too hot for him in the States because Pinkerton was following him very closely. He came through Fairview, but he wasn't the only one. There was Bill Miner, and there was Matthew Roderick, the famous robber of the Camp McKinney region, and Father Pat, who was the beloved Anglican priest, and so a number of individuals gravitated to this town because it was a coming town, it was a boom town, at least for a given period of time.
Okay. You were talking about the town site a little bit earlier. What caused the battle? You said there was an original, a secondary town site that was in competition. Tell me about the first town site. What was established there?
Well, the first town site, you had the Golden Gate Hotel, you had the Fish House, you had the post office, you had a number of businesses, including one belonging to the mayor of Kelowna originally was Dick Parkinson. His father came out of Fairview. And so that's a rather interesting connection to Kelowna there. And he was in that first town site. That would be the Latimer town site. And Dear Davidson and Russell said they thought Fairview was going to be a town of several thousand. And it just never got off the mark.
Yeah. So they developed the second town site.
So they developed the second town site.
It was all laid out very nicely, wasn't it? I mean, it had grandiose schemes. This was going to be the town of the interior.
Oh, sure it was.
And tell me again about a couple of the very good landmarks in the second town site.
Well, in the second town site, there was Dear Davidson and Russell's mining office, which was kind of a come hardware store as well, and of course the famous Hotel Fairview.
And that was the one that was called the Big Teepee.
That was the one that was called the Big Teepee because the Indians felt that the tower on this building reminded them of a teepee. So generally, although it was the Hotel Fairview and a very luxurious hotel indeed, it was called the Big Teepee by practically everyone.
Was it just a huge structure in the middle of nothing?
You know, basically it was a huge structure in the center of a barren flat, the sagebrush and rattlesnakes not too far away. So it's kind of a fascinating enigma in this particular area. It really didn't seem to belong, Mike.
That's right. And how many people would it hold? It looks like a building that would hold 100.
Well, it was a three-story structure, and it would probably hold in the 20s or 30s. It had a billiard room, it had a saloon, it had a number of rooms for patrons in the hotel, and so it was quite a fancy structure.
And it is the story, a treasure story is associated with it too.
Yeah, indeed.
Because it had a bit of a sad ending.
It was probably the ending of the Hotel Fairview marked the beginning of the end for the town of Fairview.
Okay, we're going to talk about the treasure story associated with the Big Teepee, the Fairview Hotel, when we come back from this break. Don't go away. Welcome back. Talking with Bill Barlee about Fairview today, and in my hand I have a spoon that looked a little the worse for wear, and on it you can see written there, Hotel Fairview. What's the story behind this reasonably rough-looking spoon, Bill?
Well, Mike, it showed that it was quite a spectacular hotel. It had its own spoons and silverware, and some of the silverware was actually sterling. In fact, you're holding some Burke sterling from the 1890s. The hotel was built in 1898 and lasted 4 years only.
So it was a roaring establishment with a pretty good reputation. A lot of money to start it.
And quite a clientele.
And these spoons, why do they look the way they do?
Well, Mike, they came through a terrifically hot fire. I mean, the fire enveloped the building in several minutes. 2 people lost their lives, and By the time it was over, the hotel was absolutely leveled. People couldn't get near it. Of course, there was no fire brigade in town. And with the loss of the Hotel Fairview, Fairview itself began to slip, and slipped drastically from then on.
Is the fire at the Fairview Hotel and the treasure story related?
Yeah, they're inextricably linked, that very definitely. Well, the story of it is rather interesting because I was out with an old friend of mine called Cyril Murray, who was a teacher in Penticton. And this was 1969, 18 years ago. And he was kind of curious about Fairview. Cyril is one of these taciturn Scots who was a very observant man. And so we went down there and looked through the old town site, and there was very little left. There was the old government building, the jail at that time. And, but we got up on the hill and looked down on the old town site, and you could see the faint outlines of where the old original buildings had stood, which is kind of an intriguing sort of thing. And Cyril asked me, he said, Bill, do you remember where or do you know where the big teepee was? And so we knew there'd been a fire at the big teepee. I said, yeah, I think I can find it. So we wandered down through the sagebrush, watching our step, because that flat is covered with not only sagebrush, but a reasonable number of rattlesnakes in that particular area, especially at that time of the year, late spring, early summer. And so we wandered down through the sagebrush, and we came across obviously the site of where the big teepee was. And we looked at it and noticed there was an old screen with holes about this big in it in the center of the site. And the site was on a kind of a sandy site, so it was very easy to dig. And Cyril and I got to talking about it, and we thought perhaps we'd come back and bring back a small mesh screen, a quarter-inch mesh screen and a couple of shovels, and take a look around. So we returned actually the next week, and we went back to the original site, and it's rather funny because we'd studied some pictures, some original photographs, which were made on glass negatives. And sometimes a glass negative gives what you call a mirror image. That is, it reverses it like you're looking in a mirror. Yeah. So Cyril had been looking at one of these images, and I'd been looking at the other. And so Cyril said, well, he said, Bill, he said, the saloon door is over there. And I said, no, Cyril, I think it's over there. And I pointed to the opposite. Oh, he said, I remember in the picture, he said, I remember quite distinctly. And he said, it was right there. And I said, no, that's mirror image. Ah, Cyril said, he looked around, let's go straight down the middle. So we walked straight down the middle, right over to the edge of the excavation. And you can still see the old boards, the old burnt boards there. Yeah. And in the sand, we started digging, filled up our screen, started shaking it out. We got Victoria quarters in the first screen.
Victoria quarters,
oh,
Queen
yeah.
Victoria quarters.
Queen Victoria quarters.
Now, would any of these in here be Queen Victoria quarters?
Oh, yes, most of those. Practically all of those are Queen Victoria, because the hotel burned in 1902, and the latest coin's 1901. So they'd be all Queen Victorias, or American coins, or English coins. There was a mixture, Mike, of three different countries there, English, American, and Canadian coins. And so, but in this first hour, it was really quite remarkable, because what had happened is why we were so lucky. And if we'd gone to that corner or the other corner, we would have missed. And what had happened is when the fire had swept through the hotel, one of the floors had collapsed. And with the collapsing of the floor, a little jewelry box had slid along the floor, hit the wall, and dropped straight down. And so we picked up this jewelry box with a lot of the coins intact, and including that diamond ring, which there were half a dozen gold coins, or at least gold pieces in there, jewelry of various types. And this was the most valuable piece. That's $4,000 or $5,000 diamond ring. And that was right from that little jewelry box that had slid down and hit the wall and burned. And the box, of course, was not left because it had been a wooden box, so all that was left was the hinges and the jewelry that was inside.
This is a beautiful ring. Did you ever find out where this ring came from?
Actually, we're quite sure it belonged to the young woman who was engaged to Dr. White at that time, and she died in the fire. She was a young school teacher. She was engaged to Dr. White, and he later married one of the Haynes women. And but this was rather interesting because this was his first fiancée.
Now, this brooch didn't survive quite as well, and obviously it had the claws established for some sort of stones to be in it, but there are no stones in this brooch at all.
Yes, it was probably in a hotter part of the fire, and of course this is probably 9-carat gold, so it wouldn't survive as well as other gold.
Now, there are other rings here, these wedding bands. Now, I don't take my wedding ring off when I go to bed at night. Where were these coming from? The same box of jewelry?
Actually, Mike, they didn't. They came from 3 different sections, actually 4 different sections of the hotel. We assumed that there were 4 small jewelry boxes in the hotel, and these came out of all. We got 6 or 7 gold and diamond rings, and those aren't all of them. These are just part of the treasure we found in Fairview, including that gold coin, which is an English half sovereign.
This is And what it would be worth today?
Well, it's hard to tell because there's a historic value in that coin. The gold value isn't that good, but it's hard to put a relative value on that because of it was found in Fairview and it came from the old fire site and so on.
This was a ring, and this helps to indicate to you just how hot that fire was.
Oh, it was incredibly hot. And that melted that gold ring, which is probably 10-karat gold.
So how much treasure did you find at the old Fairview Hotel?
Well, it's hard to put a definite value on it, Mike, but I think when we take in the actual intrinsic value and then the historic value, probably around $10,000 worth.
$10,000.
Yeah.
And that's silver coins from 3 countries?
Yeah.
Gold coins? All sorts of things?
And this is a fraction of the treasure. This isn't all of it, but it's some of the better pieces that Cyril and I discovered.
It must be fascinating to sift through and see the story come up. For example, what have we got here? What's this?
Well, that's a silver chain, watch fob, and
Each link is stamped.
Individually hallmarked, right?
And who would that have belonged to? I mean, is that the kind of thing you can trace back? This must be a very memorable accessory.
Mike, most men of substance of that era either carried a silver chain or a gold chain. And so it would be a businessman or a promoter coming into the area.
Somebody would be forgiven for thinking that these were lead shot when you just hauled them out, but what is this?
Actually, that's silver, and they're silver nuggets, and they were probably, at one time, cufflinks and tie.
You could see that there was some sort of a jewelry attachment there because it looks like there's some copper or brass coloring in there.
Yeah, at one time it probably fitted on the tie.
Can you give me an indication of how you felt? Can you take yourself back to that day with your quarter-inch screed and your shovels?
Okay.
I mean, what did it feel like?
Well, it was kind of funny, Mike, because first of all, we didn't expect to hit treasure within the first 2 minutes. And, which we essentially did. And this was a Saturday. And so we, in the first couple of hours, before the sun started beating down on us unmercilessly, we covered around $4,000 worth. And we thought, my heavens, this is an awful easy way to recover treasure. And so then what we did is we went back. We realized that probably we wouldn't get a long time there. So we went back before school. Cyril and I would get up about 5 o'clock in the morning and leave Summerland at about 5:30, go down to Fairview, and work for about an hour and a half, then get cleaned up, and just get back into the classroom before class started. And we would recover something virtually every trip. And the interesting thing was, some of the people from the area began to wonder what we were doing, and of course we didn't want to give it away, so we had to kind of lead them astray slightly, and so we had a couple of old bottles propped up, which were all burned and beaten, and they said, well, what are you doing? I said, well, we're looking for bottles, which of course we weren't, but if we had tipped them off, of course, we would have been overrun. And that's eventually what happened. We probably stayed in there for 3 or 4 months off and on, probably went down there 12 or 15 different times, and each time we recover a little bit or a lot. Now, if we hit one of the little strong boxes or jewelry boxes that came down the stairs, then we hit a lot. Like
that was like a mother lode.
That's
right.
And you never knew when to expect it because the ground was very, very easy to screen. It was sand, and we knew that 2 people had lost their lives in the fire, including the manager of the hotel, a man called Matthias. And he had escaped the fire and then had gone back for something. Now, either he went back for gold coins or he went back for paper currency, and we don't know which because both were used at the time. And we didn't find many gold coins. So if he went back for gold coins, he did not get out the second time. I found his false tooth, in fact, on the and somewhere in the collection. Yes, it is slightly.
Some cowboy must have been staying at the hotel because we have a couple of what do you call it, ferrules?
Well, these are actually rowels.
Rowels.
Yeah, part of the spur apparatus. They belong on the boot. And this guy was in such a hurry to get out. He left his boots behind and obviously his belt because the belt buckle's there. So he left in a big hurry, as most of the people in the hotel did.
I would guess so. And a tragic story of the young lady whose diamond ring waits for her still.
That's right.
That's really remarkable.
And she's buried up in that the old cemetery way up above Fairview town site itself. Not much left in the cemetery, Mike, but as near as we can tell, around 36 people were interred there. And old Mr. Simpson down in Oliver did the research on that. And he was a man that I knew quite well.
How important is a cemetery site to someone like yourself who's writing up stories and history. How does the cemetery site help you?
Well, it does if the headstones are still there, Mike, but often they aren't. And so it makes it rather difficult. So you can go, you can sometimes get the records through the provincial government and other records, but it does help if the headstones are still intact and the names on the headstones are legible.
Now, doesn't a cemetery have to be registered either with the church or with the government at this stage, or hadn't we reached that stage of sophistication by then?
Yes, it would have had to have been registered on the deaths and so on under special statistics, but nevertheless, it's still difficult to know exactly how many people were buried in Fairview. Remember that Fairview lasted from the early 1890s, especially the late 1890s, and by about 1902, after the burning of the hotel, it started to slip, Mike. And then by 1906, it was definitely on the decline.
Okay. We have a couple of photographs that we can look at last. There is still the jail around, only this jail is no longer on the site. Where's the jail now?
Okay, the jail now, well, I think for safekeeping, was taken from, first it was on original site in Fairview, and then it was moved up to the site we see pictured here, and it was there for many years. But it began to receive rather poor treatment, and they were afraid, some of the historians locally were afraid that it would disappear, either through vandalism or through fire. And so they took the jail and moved it down next to the museum in Oliver, and it's debatable, and it loses some of its mood when it comes out of the original area, but at least it's safe.
Who was incarcerated there, do you know?
No, but there were several murders in Fairview, and of course many misdemeanors. Mostly drunks spent their time in the jail in Fairview.
And when we take a look at the town site, can you relate this town site to me in any way?
Well, the original town site is rather obvious here. You can see Reed Creek Gulch way up the end of the towards the end of the picture, the background of the picture.
Is that off to the right?
And that's off, well, to the kind of the left-hand side.
Uh-huh.
And all you can see now in Fairview is the signs of the old town. If you were to get up on the side hill and look down, occasionally you can see these fade outlines that are disappearing year by year, Mike. Yeah. So that there is very little left in Fairview.
So anybody wants to go with this quarter-inch screen there, there's not going to be much left, because I would imagine quite a few people attended the site after the story of your treasure came out.
Oh yes, it was gone over extremely well by a legion of individuals who were rather fascinated.
All right, where are we going to go next time?
I think next week we'll probably move into a different part of the country. We'll go down to Old Yale, which was the great gold town on the Fraser River for many years, the metropolis of the Fraser.
Not only was it a gold town in its own right, but it was a transportation center. Everybody who went to the Caribou had to go through there virtually.
That's right.
All right, Yale is where we go next time when you join us for Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. We'll see you then.